Hi there, thanks for tuning in. I wanted to make a video about how it is that I got started in this world of tarot, how I bought my first tarot deck, and a little bit of history about that deck. So I grew up outside of Seattle, and I ended up getting my first deck when I was 16 years old. I was a junior in high school, and I had entered into high school in 1990. So, for the life of me, I have tried to remember, but can't, what my first knowledge of tarot would have been, because I didn't have any friends that were into it, that had decks that I can recall. I didn't have anyone in my family that introduced me to it, and I can't remember if there was any TV shows or movies that I'd seen that had tarot decks, but I imagine that somehow they must have crossed my awareness at some point before the actual time that I saw the first deck. But if that happened, I can't remember. We definitely had Ouija boards. I was familiar with those. But I don't remember having any knowledge of tarot until the first time that I saw the deck that I would purchase. And if you've been to Seattle, then you know about Pike Place Market. It's the big open air waterfront market. They have the produce sellers and the fish market there, and it's multi-level. And if you go down into the bottom levels, you kind of avoid the tourists that are up top. And I liked to go there whenever I went into the city. And down in the bottom levels, there's a couple kind of cool sort of occulty places. One was an herb shop, an apothecary, and that's still there. And there was also a magic shop. And at this magic shop, and that's stage magic, they sold, like little magic tricks and big posters of magicians. And I was there one time with a few friends, and I was looking, they had a glass cabinet. And in that cabinet, what I saw was this. The box looked like this, and I saw this Wheel of Fortune. So this design just mesmerized me, seeing this Wheel of Fortune. Now, this is the actual tarot deck that's the first one that I ever owned, although this one is not specifically the first one. This version is the first deck. The actual first deck that I ever owned has since been dispersed into many art projects, and the cards have been given away individually, and I think I still have maybe, like a dozen or so of those original cards. But over the years, I no longer have that full deck. So I saw this image, and like I said, I was really drawn to it, but I don't remember looking at this and going like, oh, those are those tarot cards, I've been looking for those. I asked the person behind the counter to take the box out for me, and they took them out, and when he turned the box around, I saw this image, the image of the sun. And again, I was just so mesmerized by this. I looked at the eyes of this sun image, and they just really, really drew me in. And I decided then and there that I was going to purchase this deck of tarot cards. So after I did that, I very shortly after that ended up buying a book on how to read them and getting into reading the cards. And but it was really the artwork that I became so obsessed with. In fact, when I was home for Christmas, I ended up finding some old drawings that I had done in high school, and this is actually one that my mom had saved, which is a copy of the Ace of Cups from that deck. So I had probably done this for some high school art project. And another thing that I did was I had one of those blue kind of denim canvas 3-ring binders, the ones that you could draw on, you could paint on them if you wanted to. And so I had painted the Wheel of Fortune. Now, after school was over, I was so into this painting that I didn't want to just throw it away. So I cut it out, and I ended up sewing it onto this pillow, and I still have it. So this is a painting that was actually on my high school notebook 20 years ago. At the time, of course, I didn't know what any of these symbols meant. I didn't know that these were Hebrew letters or that these were the alchemical elements. I just knew that this was a very, very intriguing design that I was very drawn to. So as it turns out, this deck is a replica of the Rider-Waite tarot. That's what it's commonly known as. It's the most popular tarot deck, and it's the one that most people think of. It's the imagery that most people recognize when you're talking about tarot. So this deck was published by, let's see, B. Shackman and Company, printed in Hong Kong, and nowhere on this box does it say Rider-Waite. So the reason why this is called the Rider-Waite deck classically is that Waite, A.E. Waite, was the person who directed the deck, and Rider was the publisher. So this deck was originally created in 1909. And it was in 1908 that the Rider Publishing Company was formed. And it was actually formed by William Rider and his son. And they took over an occult publishing company that was going out of business. And the Rider Company, which still exists today, was an imprint, or it is now, of Penguin Random House. And so they were publishing occult books. They actually published Bram Stoker's Dracula. And at the creation of the deck of cards, which was drawn by Pamela Coleman Smith, and as I said, directed by A.E. Waite, Rider published it. Now, I don't know why, but Rider stopped publishing this deck in 1938. So after that, it was picked up by other publishing companies. There's a company called Merrimack that published it. There was another one called Albano. But the decks that most people are familiar with, and the name that most people are familiar with today, the modern day Rider-Waite, are actually published by U.S. Games Systems. So U.S. Game Systems is a company that was founded in 1968 by Stuart Kaplan. And Kaplan, prior to creating U.S. Game Systems, was actually someone who worked on Wall Street. But he was always very much interested in different kinds of games, and he had taken a trip to Germany where he had attended the Nuremberg Toy Festival. So while he was there, it was the first time that he had ever seen tarot cards. And apparently he had a very similar kind of reaction that I had the first time that I saw them. Because he looked at these cards, and these were, this was a deck that was published by a Swiss company called A.J. Mueller. And he was just very, very fascinated by them. And he said, you know what, I am going to try importing these cards to the US because I think that people would really be into them there. Now, that first deck that he imported was not actually the Rider-Waite deck. It was another deck that is a little bit more structured, like a Marseille. It's an older style of deck. And it's called the 1JJ Swiss Tarot. So he ended up importing that deck to the US and subsequently creating the US Game Systems company. After he did that and he found that he was very successful, he imported another deck, and basically that's what sparked the whole tarot movement in the United States, was because this was the person that brought these cards. And because it was all very new in the US, Kaplan even had to write some of the very early tarot books explaining even, you know, what the cards were, how to use them. So he really did a lot of that research and put out some of those early books, and has just been a huge tarot enthusiast ever since. Eventually, he did purchase the copyright to the Rider-Waite deck. Now, as far as that copyright goes, eventually this deck will be put into public domain, meaning that you can no longer copyright the images. It's open for anybody to be able to use. Now, the UK laws are a little bit different than the US laws, and the UK laws say that the copyright stands until 70 years after the artist's death. 70 years after Pamela Coleman Smith's death would be 2022. So in a few more years, these images will be in public domain and they can be used by anybody without a copyright. That being said, the laws in the US are a little bit different. And although the images actually did go into the public domain already in 1968, there is still a copyright that US Game Systems has on the deck, but that has more to do with the box and the back of the cards than the actual imagery of the cards. So that's why you see those images used again and again in books and on all kinds of things, that jewelry and t-shirts and everything is printed with those really, really well-known tarot images. So I want to go ahead and show you guys this version of the RiderWaite deck. But as I said, on this box, all it says is complete set of tarot cards with instructions, with easy to follow instructions. And that's all it says. There's no date, although what I could find from looking this up online is that this deck was published in 1961. So again, that would have been before US Game Systems was even founded. And I actually have not looked at these cards since receiving them, so this is going to be a little bit of a blast from the past for me. So in this package, and you can still find these, probably not new, but you can get them online if you just search the Shackman Tarot. Now, do I recommend that you get this version? We'll talk in a second. The back of the cards looks like this. It has this kind of brown tile pattern, which I remember. That's the same one that my original deck had. And they're very, very vibrant in color. As you can see, we've got the Knight of Wands here on the front. This deck also has a couple of inserts, so let me take a look. This first one looks like a spread sheet. So this says card positions. It gives you a map here with 10 different tarot card positions, and it says spreading the deck or telling the fortune. Directions: take the top card after the questioner has shuffled the deck and place it in position on the chart below. See small direction book for further information. So it gives you these 10 spots to lay the cards, and it has little instructions under each one. For instance, this card shows the questioner's environment. This card shows his attitude, the influence affecting the questioner. So it's standard tarot spread. And then this is the little booklet, and it's very short, yet it actually has a suggestion for every single card on here. It's just very, very brief. But for instance, let's take a look. The Lovers: attraction, loveliness, affection, elegance, concord. And there is very, very little information here, but it does give you, as I said, just a small statement about each card. And then again, that same tarot spread is duplicated on the back here with a little bit more information, but not much. Now, what you'll find if you have this deck is this is actually not necessary, because those same card meanings are printed on the bottom of each card. And this is where things get interesting, because the explanations, the keywords, or the interpretations, if you will, of what each card means that are printed on here are so bizarre. I have absolutely no idea how they came up with these concepts or how they put them together with each of these cards. I don't know if it's something that somebody from this this card company came up with. And actually, I did look up the B. Shackman and Company Incorporated still exists, and you can go to their website, which I think was just shackman.com. But when I searched tarot, nothing came up. They had greeting cards and things of that nature, but nothing like this. So just for instance, we'll look at the very first card, Knight of Wands, and you can see that the word down here says alienation. And to have alienation be a concept for Knight of Wands is just pretty strange to me. This is a good one. So the next one here is Queen of Cups, and it says, woman of uncertain character. So whenever I first got these cards, all I could do was go by whatever the little meaning was on the bottom. And it's just very, very interesting what some of the choices are that they've made. For instance, the Eight of Swords says, scandal for a woman. Now, classically, certain tarot cards represented certain kinds of people. For instance, somebody who has light hair, dark hair, lighter skin or dark skin, older or younger, male or female. And I have found that in modern times, to associate these cards with somebody's outward appearance is really not very useful, because it's like judging somebody just by the way that they look. Is that really how you're going to know what's going on with somebody? I find it much more helpful to use the cards to describe somebody's character, how they behave, what their attitude is, what it is that compels them. Those to me are the much more interesting things about a person that I'm looking for, as opposed to just what they look like. But here's an example. On the Seven of Wands, this card says a dark child. I don't know exactly what a dark child means, but so far you can see that they just kind of have these random interpretations. But what's really funny is that some of them actually are completely the opposite of really what I think the classic interpretation is. For instance, you'll get some really beautiful and good cards like the Six of Wands. This is classically a very positive card. You see, even from the image, I don't have to tell you that if you don't know the meaning of the card, you can see there's some kind of a victory going on here. Here's somebody that's coming back with a victory wreath here, and it's a celebration. Yet look at what the words say on the bottom. Betrayal by a friend. So that's kind of a stretch to me. Let's see if I can find another one that's an example like that. Now, some of them are pretty obvious. You know, that Nine of Swords, not a good image. And it says down here on this card, a bad omen. So I could understand why they would put that there. But let's see if there's one more. Oh, here's another one with the Seven of Cups. It says, a fair child, comma, resolution. Again, you know, there's not even children anywhere in this card, so I don't know how they chose that. It's funny. Here's another one. Eight of Cups. Now, this is a card that I classically call the breakup card, because what it represents is somebody walking away from something that they'd invested some emotional energy into, but that they had to leave it unfinished. Yet, on the bottom here, it says, marriage with a fair woman. So, as you can see, there are some very strange ideas, whoever decided to put together these little comments on the bottom, and I've never seen those duplicated anywhere else. The reason why I wanted to buy this tarot deck, even though of course I knew that it had those weird words on it, was really just for my own amusement, and for the fact that this was the very first tarot deck that I ever owned, and because, as I said, there's that image that I showed you guys earlier that I had drawn in class. I really I wanted to have the complete deck just because I'm a collector. So there you have it. There's a little bit of history about the Rider-Waite deck, and I hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time.